Starting today, I will be reading a new book called The Art of Walk, a proven path to discovering what you were meant to do, by Jeff Goins. Introduction: The cancer that couldn't stop a triathlete. Many are called, but few are chosen. Matthew 22:14. A calling is not some carefully crafted plan. It's what's left when the plan goes horribly wrong. One June evening in 2000, Eric Miller skipped a company meeting to watch his 5-year-old son play t-ball. During the game, he and his wife Nancy noticed their little Garrett was having problems placing the ball on the tee and couldn't seem to balance properly. Concerned, they took him to the doctor, who immediately ordered a CT scan. When the Millers were asked to wait in what medical professionals call the quiet room, Eric knew something was wrong. As a nurse, he was well acquainted with the purpose of the room. It was where people want to receive bad, sometimes horrible news. The time was 6 in the evening. By 11:30, Garrett was admitted to Children's Hospital in Denver, Colorado, and immediately sent into surgery. The next morning, on June 24, a golf ball-sized tumor was removed from the back of the 5-year-old boy's head. He was diagnosed with the 𝕎𝕠𝕣𝕜, a word his dad says no child should ever have to know. After the surgery, Garrett was left behind, mute and paralyzed, put on a ventilator to help him breathe. He would have to learn how to walk, talk, and go to the bedroom all over again. Even if by some miracle he was able to do all that, he was still given only a 50% chance of surviving the next 5 years. The Millers began counting the days they had left with their son. One day in the middle of the cancer treatments, while looking at his son, Eric thought about how the clock was running out of Garrett's life. In spite of the challenges he's facing his little boy and the worry this caused, he realized something. It was an epiphany of sorts. Working in the medical profession, an industry where the clock runs out on people all the time, Eric realized he was wrong. It wasn't just Garrett's life that could end at any second. It was all of theirs. There was no guarantee anyone in the Miller family would outlive Garrett. We needed to be living life all of the time, Eric told me, because none of us are guaranteed that we're going to be around an hour or two from now. Whatever time they had left, the Millers were going to live life to the fullest. After Garrett was moved out of the ICU and taken off the ventilator, his dad wondered if there was anyone out there who knew how he was feeling. Sitting in a window bay of the hospital, he prayed for an answer to the despair that threatened to destroy what little hope his family had left. That was around the time he discovered the story of Matt King, an IBM engineer and world-renowned tandem cyclist who happened to be blind. That fall, Eric and his son took his son to meet Matt King at a nearby cycling event, where Garrett got the chance to sit on a tandem bicycle and squeeze the handlebar with his hands, feeling the pedals beneath his feet. That was the day light bulb came on for Garrett. After that, he was determined to ride again, which, unbeknownst to him or his dad, was the beginning of a process that would not only change their lives, but the lives of countless others. A few moments later, Garrett told his mom he wanted to try riding his bike. She wasn't so sure, but he insisted. By then, some of his sight had returned, and he was able to walk, albeit just a little. With his mother's help, Garrett mounted the old bike and began pedaling. At first, she ran with him as he pedaled clumsily, helping him balance. But soon his legs took him faster than she could run, and he escaped her grasp. if only for a moment to experience the freedom he had known before the cancer had taken control of his body. That same day, his dad brought home a brand new tandem bicycle so the two of them could ride together. 6 months later, on June 24, 2001, after a year of radiation and chemotherapy, 6-year-old Garrett crossed the finish line of his first ever triathlon. His dad ran behind him, pushing his wheelchair. It was 1 year to the day after that first debilitating surgery. For the father-son duo that had endured so much, the race was a way of declaring to the world, and perhaps to themselves, that they would not let any little tumor stop them from continuing with their lives, from celebrating life itself. Thanks to the clinical treatments his parents had enrolled him in, Garrett's survival rate had now increased to 90%. That was 14 years ago. Since that first surgery that nearly crippled him so many years ago, Garrett has competed with his father in more than a dozen triathlons, as well as one of his own. His eyesight, though not fully restored, has returned to the point that he can see blurry objects and shapes. He is still considered legally blind, but can do things that doctors said were impossible. He is, without exaggeration, a walking miracle. That is not a book about miracle. This is not a book about miracle. It is a book about finding your calling, about how you discover what you were born to do. A calling is that thing that you cannot do. An answer to the age-old question, what should I do with my life? There are books that talk about how to find your dream job or what it takes to become an expert. This just isn't one of them. The Art of Walk is a book about vocation, a word that has come to mean something very different from the original definition. The word vocation comes from the Latin root vocare or vocare, which means to call. It was originally used in a religious sense, as in a call to the priesthood. And for centuries, people thought of it as just that something reserved for an elite group of people, for those special few who were lucky enough to be called. But what if that isn't true? What if a calling is something everyone has? In this book, I will try to recapture that ancient understanding of vocation as something more than a job. Through stories of everyday people, I will argue that much of what we think about calling, if we think about it at all, is wrong. The way to meaningful walk doesn't always look like a carefully crafted plan. Sometimes, the route to our purpose is a chaotic experience, and how we respond matters more than what happens to us. Each chapter tells a different person's story, illustrating a major concept, one of 7 stages of a calling. And although the stories differ, they all share one similarity. Each person was in some way surprised by what he or she found. This, I think, is a story which we don't hear enough of today, one that just might help us understand our own personal journeys better. And where do we see this more than in the story of a 5-year-old boy who beat brain cancer and went on to race in a triathlon? In his 18 years of life, Garrett Rush Miller has completed a half Ironman, climbed Machu Picchu, and earned the rank of Eagle Scout. When he's not at school or working at the local climbing gym, he spends his free time volunteering with Wounded Warriors, a charity that supports and encourages war veterans. At the time of this writing, he's getting ready to graduate high school and more than anything would like a girlfriend. After Eric emailed me with some news clippings of his son's story, I immediately picked up the phone and called them. Speaking with both of them during Garrett's lunch break, I was struck by how positive they were and how important perspective was in their story. Theirs wasn't a rags to the riches tale, or some super spiritual experience. It was inspiring but also quite practical. All they were doing was trying to survive, making sense of life along the way, and that was a story I could relate to. I asked Garrett if he ever thought about what life would have been like if he had never missed the tea that day. If he had never gotten the brain tumor and hadn't got to go through 64 weeks of chemo. I've never really thought about it, to be honest. He admitted. His dad said the same. The reality, Eric explained, is these are the cards we've been dealt with, and we will just play them the best we can. Eric Miller has always tried to steer his son in the direction of what he can do, not what he can't, and that little lesson has led to some incredible experiences for both of them. The gift that Garrett's dad gave him wasn't protection from pain or suffering, as much as Eric would have liked to provide such things. It was helping Garrett see that what makes a life extraordinary aren't the chances we get, but what we do with them. Course correction for your calling. At some point, you entertained the idea that you were born to do something significant, but then high school happened, or college, and your parents talked you into something, or becoming a lawyer instead of a baker. That professor told you med school was a smarter move than relocating to New York to try out an acting career. And you believed them. When real life began, you gave up, but called it growing up instead, and abandoned the dream altogether. You made excuses for why wanting something extraordinary was somehow selfish and immature, and you wondered if any of those youthful feelings were ever real in the first place. But then, you knew you were wrong. No matter how noisy the world got, no matter how busy you became, there would always be something inside you, a small voice that whispered in the quieter moments of life, taunting you with the shadow of an lived life. If you listen hard enough, you can still hear it. Everywhere you look, people are giving excuses for not pursuing what they were born to do. Some say they are a work in progress, while others shrug with indifference, saying they're still trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. Such phrases sound harmless, but they are anything but. If we're honest, a lot of us feel stuck, aimlessly wandering from one job to the next, unsure of what to look for or even expect. We've accepted our lot in life. It is what it is. Even though we do our best to embrace reality, we are restless. What comfort do we have other than the vague notion that we are not alone? As we enter a new era in human history, as the average lifespan increases and the world becomes an even more efficient place full of technological solutions, people are asking deeper questions. We now realize the way we've been doing work no longer works. Factories are getting smaller, not bigger. The 40-year career is dead. The world demands a fresh approach to vocation, and we need something new, or perhaps something very old. There is a way to meaningful work that doesn't force you to conform to your parents' career path or promise your values, compromise your value. It won't be like any class you've taken, and probably won't resemble what your teachers told you the future would look like, but it can be trusted. There is more to life than what happens to you, and more to a vocation than punching a clock. But how do we find such a way that seems so far gone? The journey described in this book is an ancient path. It's the way of master craftsmen and artisans, a centuries-old road that requires both perseverance and dedication. The narrow path that few find. Here we follow in the footsteps of computer scientists and park rangers participating in the same process that made world-famous cartoonists, compassionate missionaries, and successful entrepreneurs. At times, you will have to trust your gut, and at others, you will need to do what is uncomfortable and even painful. But as you go, there will be signs along the way, markers ensuring that you are headed in the right direction. The path described here is not a manual for life. It's a piece of canvas on what to add, which to add, your own experience. This isn't some science experiment with predictable results, and it won't be another self-help program that leaves you feeling passively inspired. After encountering hundreds of stories from people who found their calling, I identified 7 common characteristics, each illustrated in the subsequent chapters. Each chapter, which tells at least one person's story, is based on a theme. 1. Awareness. 2. Apprenticeship. 3. Practice. 4. Discovery. 5. Profession. 6. Mastery. 7. Legacy. You might want to think of those steps, but they are more like overlapping stages that once began continue for the rest of your life. For example, once you learn the discipline of awareness, you continue to practice this throughout your apprenticeship, continually looking for guidance along the way. The same is true for practice. It's something you keep doing long after you acquire a skill. That is a process to finding your life's walk. Although at first it may feel chaotic, there is an order emerging from such chaos. And if you commit to following these stages, paying attention along the way, and persevering, you will have something rare, something you can be proud of. Letting go of what could have been. Part of people's problems is they think of everything that could have been. Eric Miller told me after his son left our phone conversation, "Who cares what the future might have been for Garrett? It doesn't matter. It can be. This is where we're at, and this is where we're going." In his voice, I could hear the military stoicism that must have served him well while dealing with more than a decade of raising a special needs child, not to mention during his career as a paramedic and nurse. He went on to tell me about his subsequent divorce and confessed that pining for what could have been only holds people back from living their lives now. Life is full of surprises, and it doesn't help us to fixate on regrets or try to recover what has been lost. Maybe that's a lot of people's problems, he added, is that they keep thinking what could have been, what would have happened if... Who gives a crap? It just happened. But what would not have happened if Garrett had never gotten sick? Now that's a whole different question, he admitted, his tone softening. We think about that all the time. None of this would have happened. My life would be totally different. None of this, not the triathlons, not the foundation they started, not the countless lives affected, none of it would have happened had it not been for a tragedy that struck the Miller family 15 years ago. Because of Garrett's illness, Eric is now able to encourage others in a way that would have been impossible before. Walking in an intensive care unit at a hospital, he gets to speak with suffering people all the time. I have authority now because of Garrett's suffering, he said. What hope does he offer these patients? What encouragement does his pain provide? He tells them to hold their heads high, even when they don't think they can. More people are watching your life and are gaining strength in their own lives and in their own challenges because of what you're going through. I promise you, your life matters. Your life is significant, and things are happening that you don't even fully understand yourself. That's what Eric has done and what he's encouraged his son to do. To acknowledge that whatever is happening in their lives now, as difficult as it might be, is important. To not hold out for the right opportunity or wait for things that get better, but to make the most of life now. The question that 𝕬𝕑𝖈𝖙𝖎𝖔𝖓's life answers is the same one many of us are afraid to ask. What happens when life you end up living doesn't look like the one you planned? Each of us has had surprises and setbacks in life, disappointments that have disrupted what we thought was the way. And we are left with something that looks less like a personal purpose and more like a mess. Hearing Garrick tell his story, I wonder if the difference between remarkable people and the rest of us has little to do with circumstance and more to do with mindset. Maybe we all have the power to turn our lives into significant stories if we start to see our difficulties as opportunities. We can't control what life throws our way, but we can control how we react to it. As we do, maybe we come closer to this, though we have to let go of what we think deserve and embrace what is, which just might lead to something better than we ever could have imagined. Your life, though not an accident, is full of surprises. The point of this book is to help you know what to do when they come. This is all for today. Tomorrow I'll be reading part 1, preparation, and of course, chapter 1 as well. This is Daniel. See you in the next chapter. Please subscribe, follow, like, share. I'll be there for you, reading books every day.